Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Adobe Live. My name is Wade Acuff, and I'll be your host today for day two with Alex Hogue. Alex, how's it going?
Going great. Glad to be back for day two, and thanks to anyone who joined yesterday.
Awesome, awesome. Looking forward to seeing what we get up to. But before that, in case you missed anything on Behance, if you missed any of the live content on Behance, you can watch the. Wow, I am blowing this completely. Let's start that over again. Hi, no, I'm just kidding. We won't go back that far. Okay, for any of the live content that you may have missed, you can catch it on Behance or on YouTube. Right before this stream, we had the AI Creative Challenge with Claudia. You can check that out as well. And you know what? Let's say hi to chat. Let's see what they think of the start of this. How's it going, chat? What is up? I see Voodoo Val. Thanks, Val, for being our mod and hanging out. I see Steve, Richard. Hopefully you guys can put a lot of content over in the, wow, a lot of questions in the chat. We're going to get there, Alex. I promise. I'm going to land this plane. Alex, how's it going? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and a recap from day one?
Yeah. So, can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. So yeah, I'm Alex. I do video production and photography, drone work up in Bend, Oregon, self-employed. And I've been doing that on my own for about 2 years now. Prior to that, I worked for GoPro for about 7 years, doing all sorts of videos for them. Before that, I worked for various companies out of college and everything, shooting weddings, Super Bowl commercials, national park videos, that sort of stuff. And I've just been doing it a while. So here I am. And I guess, so yesterday, sorry, I'm taking after you, Wade.
No, I'm sorry. I set a horrible example for the start of this, but I think we're going to get there. We're going to be fine. Everybody just take a breath. We're going to be all right.
All right. Reset. All right. So yeah, I'm Alex. You guys can check out some of my work. alexhogue.com is my website here. As I was saying, I've kind of done a whole bunch of different projects for various companies. Some of my clients have done work for Red Bull, GoPro, Skydio. This is the project we started yesterday. We're going to continue on that today. Feel free to head over. I've done a little bit of animation stuff, kind of the works. And then in addition to that, I also do photography, mostly as a hobby, mostly landscape photography. But occasionally I do it as a career thing as well, whatever you want to call it. So that's just some of my stuff. And then over here on Instagram, this is something fun, kind of, I just did this purely out of fun, shot some photos up at one of the motocross races. So just getting really creative, and I kind of enjoy that process. So that's why I'm here. And as I was saying yesterday, we kind of started diving into this project here, and I'm just going to let this play without the audio for those who may not have seen it. But it's a project I did with Skydio. They're a drone manufacturing company out in, they're based in the US. And I was asked to go out there and film this, which was out in British Columbia. And then a little while later, I was asked to edit it. So it is, the piece that we're focusing on is a smaller piece that was done as, product advertising branding for Skydio. But the main video that we shot out there was a larger piece. So these are some of the shots. We're going to be going through this. Today, we're going to be touching on kind of polishing things up. Yesterday, we started with story structure, how to pull selects and, go through music, that sort of stuff. So.
Yeah, I think we left yesterday with sending it off to the client to get comments. Yep. Is that right?
That's correct.
That where we're going to pick back up?
Yeah, we're going to dive right in there if we're ready to do that.
So, yeah, whenever you're ready.
Pause this. So yesterday, we left off over here in Premiere, and we have our edit here. So we kind of talked story structure, going through, how to time out maybe some action shots and give a little break for some what I like to call raw moments, which are basically those moments of dialogue of, maybe it wasn't they didn't know the camera was recording, or it was just something fun. So weren't super concerned with polishing yesterday. We just wanted to, our primary goal is to get structure lock. So what that means is basically getting all your shots dialed in, getting the content there, getting the music in, and hopefully, you know, the client's liking the music, they're liking the story arc and that sort of stuff. So
well, go ahead.
So yesterday, I'll just recap this really quick because we had some issues with Frame.io loading in my Premiere yesterday. If you go to, so what we did yesterday was we basically uploaded this sequence to Frame.io, and Frame.io is this, whoops, let's see if I have it up. Frame.io is a review site that now is part of Adobe Creative Cloud. And basically you can take links, upload it, send it out to clients, and get your feedback remote. So yesterday I kind of showcased how to upload this through the web browser. But just to touch on it really quick, because yesterday this wasn't working, and I think today we have it working. If you go to Window, let's say we wanted to upload this sequence here, what we finished yesterday. Window, Review with Frame.io, that's going to bring up this window here. So in this spot, I'm logged into my Frame.io. I have all my different folders for clients and everything. I go to Skydio. I've already uploaded it here, as we did on the web browser yesterday. But if I wanted to upload directly from Premiere, what I could do is go to Upload, Active Sequence, and then it's going to give you these options here for what settings you want to do. You can tell it to render to your computer, that sort of stuff, and then you just hit Upload. So I just wanted to touch on that yesterday since we didn't get it working. But
are there any advantages or disadvantages one way or the other program? Or?
You know, it seems to work pretty well now. In the past, before even Adobe acquired, I've been using this for years. In the past, I would sometimes get upload issues and render issues, and it would just get stuck. So I prefer to just render it out directly to my computer and then use the web browser. But one thing I do really like is once it's up and you get the comments in, I really like the way that the comments are integrated with the video, and I can actually import those directly into my timeline, which is what I'm going to show you guys now.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So over here, we see online, we got a bunch of notes, and these are actual notes, but hypothetical people here. So these were some of the notes I got back on one of the versions. There were several versions. We're kind of cheating it here with maybe just showing one version. Shooting some mountains. So I could go here and go through these notes. If you click it, it'll take you right to the time code. We're seeing what the notes are here. As I go through and edit, I can check these off, which is kind of nice. And then you can even, you know, you could check a couple of these. And then as you're going through them, if you don't want them there anymore to see what work you got, hit the hide. And then you're like, okay, this is what's left. So if you get a whole bunch of comments, hopefully you don't. That's a good way to kind of organize it and go through it. But we're going to uncheck that for now. And then over here back in Premiere, this is our timeline. It's not exact the one we did yesterday, but it's pretty close. This is, again, that window review with Frame.io. There's also in your workspaces, you can come down, where is it? Review. That will set up basically the same thing. So if we come in here, we're logged in, double click, and this works just like the web browser. And we see our video here. We can play it back. We can see our comments here. We can see all the replies.
Does that retain the, you showed us yesterday where you could like draw on the frames. Does that retain that as well?
Yeah. So if there were comments drawn on, let's just show one here. I don't know if it'll update right this second, but if someone were to, you know, you can click this icon down here and draw on the frame. And then it's there. So that'll all carry over. So it works exactly the same way in Premiere as it does on the website. It probably won't update. Oh, it did. Look at that.
There you go. Look at that.
Instantaneous.
Yeah, that's
love that. I've never actually tried that, so it's pretty cool. So what's actually really neat here, if this is our sequence that we uploaded yesterday, I go to the start time code of 00, and I go to the start time code of 00 here. Very beginning. this button right here in the middle, you can link playheads. I have it linked to another one. I'm going to relink it to this one right now just because I was testing it a little bit. So now when I play this back, it should play both my sequence and this one at the same time. It might get a little laggy, but let's see how it goes. Let's try that one more time. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So it's lagging a little bit, but. Out here with some Skydio drones. So I think because we're streaming right now, the playback's not super smooth, but typically it's shot for shot.
Shooting some mountain biking.
But what's really cool is then I can go through here, click here, and we can see these comments in real time as we're going through. And we could make our own markers on the timeline if we wanted to make a note of that. The other thing we can do, once this is linked, we can come up here to the comments. And here's all of our comments that we've been getting from our client. Now you can go through and check them off, as you go through here. You can also do this really cool thing and import comments. So make sure your timeline is synced up and everything first, but then when you import comments, boom, now we have all these markers here.
Oh, nice.
Which is pretty cool because now it's just built in the program, and I could even just, close out of this if I wanted to. So we can go through and see what these markers are.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I don't know why it adds all this stuff. I think that's just some behind the scenes. But yeah, pretty cool. So we can see, this shot is one I'd be interested in seeing it speed ramped all the way out if it has room to do so between the drone movements. So let's go ahead and go through a couple of these. I'm going to close out of this just because I think it might be slowing it down a bit. Drop this down. And we are, for those who are joining in, if it looks blurry, we are working with proxies, which is basically a smaller resolution file to play back smoother because this project is full of 4K footage and some 8K red footage. So it gets pretty intensive.
Yeah, you explained proxies a little bit yesterday. So if anybody wants to check that out from day one, there's a little in-depth how-to with proxies.
So let's kind of go through some of these. So this note here from the client was basically they want to see this shot play out longer. We show kind of this section here, and then the full shot they actually do. They do ride this out all the way. It's a cool shot, but it takes a long time to get there. In another section, where was it? So there was another point in the video. I think it might have been just kind of a fun little zoom in I did. Let's see where it was. Let's see here. Oh, now I can't find it now that I'm on the spot. Anyways.
Well,
oh, sorry. So anyways, basically the idea was we want to see this whole shot played out. So they maybe want to time remap that a little bit was one of the notes. So that's going to affect our timing and everything here a bit. Let's check out some of the others. This is just epic shot. They like it. That's cool. Those are the kind of notes I like. Because they're just so, the scale is insane.
Val is saying this is like a feedback dream.
Yeah, these are the good ones, and we did go through a couple of revisions, but overall, yeah, the piece was well received right off the bat, which is great. So I think going back, this was kind of the section that was the trickiest to navigate, and it's kind of good. This is why we didn't dial in music completely yesterday and sound and everything, because this note right here was, for those that can't read it, I feel like cutting out here might have more energy. I like the Whistler bike park line, but could we move it somewhere else in the edit? And then the next comment for the next shot was something like, personally, I don't feel this line is impressive enough to be to be the payoff for the raw audio moment that precedes it, just because of how slow and careful they're taking it. So it is pretty intense, but I agree, they are going fairly slow. So the idea was to maybe, when this music hits back in right here, to put something maybe a little bit more exciting. And the suggestion was maybe the shot from the 115 mark. So let's go take a look at 115. Maybe we put this shot. So this shot might need to move to over here. And remember, the note on this shot was they want to see it all the way to the end. So time remapped. And then in here, let me just play this. So the line they're talking about, it just feels like it holds and drags a little long when he says, oh, you know, he's kind of joking about hiking up the side of this cliff when we go into the Whistler Bike Park. So let's listen to that real quick.
There's no way to get around.
This whole freaking amazing landscape, and looks like there's a 6 shelf that we could ride.
There's no way to get around.
There's no way down that way.
Sheer cliffs all the way around.
Yeah, we're really doing it now. That's what we're doing. We're really doing it. So, have you heard of the Whistler Bike Park?
All right, so these notes aren't too bad, honestly. This is pretty good, but we do have a little bit of kind of restructuring we would need to do here. So the quick fix here, and again, we didn't drag out this music. In a later version, I kind of duplicated, and I touched on this briefly yesterday, but I duplicated the end of this track because it goes back into it right here. And we just kind of, what I did was I put like a low pass filter, I think, on it. Yeah, like a low pass filter, and turned it down to maybe 3000. So what that sounds like now is just kind of really just the low tones of the song. So I did that to kind of extend this section here where it feels a little hollow. Let's play that again, on and off.
Down that way.
Sheer cliffs all the way around.
It's pretty
Yeah, we're
empty
really doing
in
it
here.
now. That's what we're doing. We're really doing it.
And we'll get into this a bit more later today when we talk about audio, but essentially we want to cut, you know, after this first line's fun enough, but it feels like we kind of hang on it maybe a little long. Good line. So we're going to move maybe, let's see here.
Whistler Bike Park.
Yeah, so we're going to basically take this, maybe move it over here. And luckily, you know, we cut the music, so that's actually a pretty easy fix.
I was going to ask, yeah, so at this point, the time wasn't locked, like the length that it needed to be wasn't locked, so it could still be pushed and pulled a little bit?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and we purposefully didn't lock everything in yesterday because these are some examples of notes you get back, and luckily that's an easy one. It's right where the music actually stopped, so I really didn't have to worry about trying to figure that out. But then the other thing is they do want to change this shot, which is, you know, pretty straightforward and easy. We wanted the shot from 115, which is this one here. So now we're swapping shot from the shot from 115. Where's that? 115. Let's maybe put this over here. We're just going to switch these around. And then remember, they did say, whoops, let's turn that on. So I'm using by the way, I use this all the time. If you don't in Premiere, it's, let's see, if you're on an Apple, it's Apple Shift E. So that's enable. And if you're on Windows, it's Windows Shift E. You can also come up here, enable, disable. So that's what I'm doing to turn these clips on and off really quick.
Real quick, if anybody's just joining us, we're with Alex Hogue, and he is showing us tips and tricks for his workflow. And if there's any questions you want to ask, let us know.
Yeah, so real quick, we just swapped this shot. And here I already have it extended and basically time remapped all the way down to them going out of shot, out of frame. So we live in that a little bit longer. And then I even took this one step forward, and I'll show you what I did here. I brought this into After Effects. And for the final version, we put a little bit of this like motion blur on there. So I'll toggle that kind of on and off. So it just kind of gives it a little bit more speed rampy feel to it. Let me turn that off. So we'll talk about how I did that here in a few minutes. Other little tweaks that I would go through and make. So now if we have this shot here, the very next shot, he's going the other direction. So this is little stuff if you're editing, just little tips to kind of pay attention to that I know when I first started editing, I may not have paid much attention to this, but it's kind of weird to the eye to see them going from left to right here. And then the next shot, he's going right to left, the other direction. It just doesn't cut super well. So what we might do.
Yeah, any of those tips, please feel free to share.
Yeah. This is kind of where I want to like throw in just little things that I look for as I'm going through an edit. So I do want to make them kind of match the same way. I could horizontally flip this and kind of cheat it a little bit. That's one option. But I do know the shot let's see. So the two shots we have right now is this shot into this shot. Go ahead and turn those off. And then what I replaced it with was something maybe that cuts a little better from here. That's not so so much the same angle. And we go into this big grand shot that they liked. And remember, the note on there was that shot's epic. Can we live in it a little bit longer? So here we had two shots before. Now we're answering that note. We're switching to this big shot. It cuts well. And we're living in it for twice as long now. So as we see here, as we're coming out of this, so this top layer here, this is just what we uploaded yesterday, basically. And this bottom layer here is kind of what I'm swapping with. But so originally we would have had the issue. Okay. And this all stems from back here. Remember, we swapped out one shot. So now to make everything else work, we kind of have to tweak everything else to make it cut together. That feels good. Going into this shot, we've extended it, but now, oh no, we had that shot again right here. So we got to take that out because it's here now. So maybe we bring in the shot we originally had right here. And then we show this shot. So then we're not going straight from going left to right. And now we had this intermediate shot, and now we can cut back into it.
Nice. Yeah, it's always about finding those little solutions after you get comments.
Yeah, and so the other thing too here that I know that I did, let's see. So originally, this shot was something more like. So we see him kind of jump off here. And I think I just originally had this is like something that would be very common. I would have this shot here. It works. Oh boy, there we go. And we see him kind of jump at the end here off this little, it's not very big, but what's kind of cool, if we listen to the music, there's kind of like this clap there. And we can actually, if you hit the Y key on your keyboard, which is this tool here, the slip tool, you can just kind of click and drag and rearrange your clip without having to move everything. I put a marker here because I knew we were going to go through this, but basically what I'm going to do, let's just solo this music for a second. So this clap that happens like right here.
Yeah,
that would be really cool to sync up with him landing right on the ground. So little stuff like that, it's very small, and to be honest, most people wouldn't notice it. But it makes a big difference because it's kind of subtle, and that's kind of the art of editing is sometimes hiding stuff and doing these things that people are like, wow, it's really cool, but I don't know, it just feels great. I don't know, what did you do? And then later we'll come in, we'll do audio. We can grab, maybe a little sound bite of a tire, because we have, this is drone footage, so there's no good sync audio with this, but maybe I go back and I find something that might work. And we add that in underneath.
Yeah, those are some nice audio tips.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but
no worries. No, it makes the makes the edit a little more poppier, crisp.
Yeah,
just a little audio cue.
Totally. So that's where it gets really fun, and you can get kind of creative. And you just, with me, I'm always thinking with audio, what else can I add? Back in college, I had this pretty pretty crazy professor that was like this audio guy, and everyone knew him, but it was also kind of the class you dreaded. But then you walk away from it years later and you're like, okay, he had some good tips, like really pay attention to audio. So then this shot can stay the same. This is what we had originally. And then we go into this one. Now, we are switching directions here again. It doesn't bother me terribly here, and I don't think you can see it in the proxy, but in the high res, there's the drones flying around in here, pretty small, pretty tiny. So that's a reason why we liked that shot. It's kind of like right here as you go through the footage. So we do want to try to get that product placement in the shot since our client is Skydio. So this shot's okay. And then they're kind of going the other direction, which it's okay. I guess this is where you'd kind of like, it's not the best, but what we could do to fix this if we wanted and nobody's going to notice is come in here, go to effects, and then just do like a horizontal flip on it. And so now this might actually cut a bit better. He's going the same direction. Our eye is matching pretty well from right here to the next shot. He's kind of in this pretty similar framing. And then now they're going down again in the same manner. So that probably works a little bit better.
A couple of comments in chat. Richard's saying just when he's thinking about ambient audio, you're already delivering. There was a question about motion blur. How did you add motion blur? I don't think you've done anything yet. For
so we had, what I think he's talking about is this section right here. And I'm going to get into that here real soon. We're going to dive into After Effects. That wasn't done in Premiere. It's just a CC pixel blur, I think it is, in After Effects. And it's just keyframed for when we time remap the shot. So to wrap this up really quick, just the edit notes in general, I'm not going to go through everything, but you guys kind of get the idea of some of the things I look for as I'm going through this. You know, make sure your shot's cut. Think about, well, as a side note, I did 360 VR stuff for a while when it first came out with the GoPro Fusion. I worked on that launch video and then again with the GoPro Max. So I did a lot of VR stuff. And the one thing I learned from that when you're making real 360 videos is if you're wearing a headset, you really got to think choreography of where the viewer's looking, because you got to kind of plan it out, which that's a whole nother bag of worms, but that's the long way of saying, try to think of where the viewer's attention is and try to match that with your shots. And you could go in here and maybe zoom in and line that up even better. So just keep that in mind as you're going through. And then again here, I think we did the same thing we did with the tire. So that clap hitting right here is right with the music beat. And then we're into our next shots, because you could hold on this too, but it just feels good to cut right as they're kind of giving that high five with the music. And then we have the music soloed, but he says,
bucket list trip for sure. So beautiful.
And then that's kind of our edit. I think that's about probably as in depth as I'll go on the notes, because I do want to get to a lot of other stuff and kind of how we did it. So let's go ahead and switch over. If there's any questions about how Frame.io works or anything, drop them in the chat.
Yeah, and I did look it up yesterday. You do have some free access with the Creative Cloud. You get 2 users, 5 projects, and 100 gigabytes of storage. If you want to use your Creative Cloud account.
Yeah, pretty sweet deal.
Yeah,
it's a great platform. So, all right. So at this point, I think let's talk. The graphics in this video are fairly straightforward and simple. And yeah, there's only a couple things I really brought into After Effects using dynamic link or copying it over, but let's go ahead and talk about some of that. So this is kind of the final. Well, actually, first, let me restart. I touched on this yesterday, but this piece is a Skydio 2 Plus in its element video. It's a breakout piece, and that is essentially, it's kind of like a little campaign or series of videos they were doing. So it has some looks already for you know, the design and branding of it that we wanted to match. So I'll show, this is another one. I happen to actually edit this one, same thing, but there are kind of these graphics that are used across the board. So in terms of what the graphics should look like, it was kind of predefined for this because they did it for several videos and they wanted something universal. I'll show the intro clip for what we did for the title and location card for this. So that was one of them. Another here is pretty similar. And notice, you know, they have this, it's basically the format for these videos was Instagram handle somewhat tracked to, you know, a body part or something like that. And then we continue this on. Same thing. So it's fairly simple, but I was asked to, you know, follow that same format since there's a couple of these here you can see in the playlist. So now going back to where we're at, this is what we ended up going with. It's just his name tracked basically to his hip, and then same for Darren up here. And then the only other thing happening is we have a small little time remap here, just to get up there sooner. And it's basically providing a natural wipe to take your eye off Kenny's and say, hey, now we're on to Darren. So it's kind of a cool little, you know, if they're both on at the same time, that also works. But it was nice to be able to just give that little time remap, match it with the music, and now we're focused on Darren's call out. So that's what we're going to focus on for how we're identifying the characters. The title was fairly simple. It was just this graphic, which was already made and provided, but if you guys want, we can recreate that in After Effects as well. It's pretty simple. And then the only other part was this location, which kind of comes in from the side with some motion blur. It's got an alpha inverted layer, so we can kind of see through it here, and then it exits off. Same thing with motion blur and some easy. So we'll talk about how to make that. One thing on this, so the original one they gave me a couple different options. If we look here, because this was already made, they're trying to make it, you know, simple. They had all these different options. There's a note on Frame.io about, hey, how do we establish this location? What looks good? This was kind of their pre-designed look that we wanted to follow for the video. I didn't get this icon back in time, so I just recreated it in After Effects and matched it to the sizing and everything, and I'll show you how to do that. So we got the names. My original pass, before having done it, you know, with their Instagram handles tracked to the side, I'll go ahead and show you guys that. I don't know if we're gonna have time to dive into it, but I think it would be pretty fun.
I mean, anything you want to get to, we can get to, and then we'll figure out what time is left.
Yeah,
and what you can
we'll
do
give it a
with
go.
that, so.
I think it'd be fun to dive into it, maybe kind of lightly. It's a little bit more intermediate After Effects than just kind of the way I keyframe the titles. But so this was kind of basically like a 3D pass of the 3D text is tracked to one of the rocks. And then we got a little bit of masking going on here. Yep. It's nothing super crazy. But I think it'd be fun to show you guys that, even though, you know, I sent that to him originally and that's not what we ended up going with. So just something to keep in mind when you are doing stuff, that if it's part of other videos and everything, a lot of companies, they will have their own branding guidelines, colors you need to use, styles. So just keep that in mind. The only other things we're going to touch on again is kind of that pixel motion blur, which I showed earlier, but it's done twice. It's kind of here. Turn these up to where so we do that. Basically, all it is a time remap in Premiere. We kind of set it up originally in Premiere with our time remap, and then we're taking that into After Effects and just adding a bit of that motion blur to it. And we did that twice here. So let's go ahead and get into it. Let's start with the titles here. So this is our, turn these off. This is our clip that our title card and location card are going to go over.
To get a zone like this that's just endless slabs.
It's like rugged West Coast.
In the ask from the
coastlines.
notes, we had it a couple different ways, but basically they wanted this graphic coming on when he says West Coast.
Rugged West Coast coastline.
And the title
so
card
unique.
As soon as we hit on the music beat.
Is this the same type of treatment they do on the other videos, or was it kind of free reign?
This is the same treatment. So the same, there's a little bit of, how it comes in depending on the shot that it's actually on, but for the most part, it's the same as these other series videos that they did here. So we're kind of copying the same thing. And, in this shot, it fits a little better, maybe in this area up here. So there's a couple cool ways to do this. If you haven't used dynamic link before, this is a perfect opportunity for it. What I like to do is so let's see, I do want to bring in some audio here so I can hear it in Premiere. So what I'll do is go to the end of this clip and maybe I'll just shift click with the blade tool. That'll cut through everything here. Go to the start of this one. Again, I'm going to hold shift click. So I'm cutting the audio. I'm bringing in everything, bringing in his voiceover, all that stuff. And I don't want to bring in any of this. Well, we can bring in the title and we can bring in the original. This is the original example, but that's not what we're going to call it. We want it to say Slab Heaven. So we're going to bring in both of these just as reference. Let's see here. So I'm shift selecting these. Shift. I'll select all of his dialogue and then we'll grab that exact music portion here. I don't need this, but basically all I'm concerned about is this section of music. So I'm going to go right click, replace with After Effects composition. I like to have an After Effects project already open, even if it's a new one or one that you're already working in. It will create its own. I just find it easier to bring everything in if you already have one open. You can see here all the highlighted stuff. It brings it all in for you, which is super cool. And then now we have everything here. So what we want to do, this element here, we'll touch on that in a minute, but that was provided. We can talk about how to make it. It's going to be very similar to how I do this. Basically, we're looking at kind of these rounded corners with maybe a little bit of slant on there. So that's how you would bring it in. And then my pro tip, I always do, and I kind of wish Adobe would change this around a little bit, but so now what you're going to realize, or what you're going to see if you come back to Premiere, we have this linked comp here. Whenever that happens, just like that, basically it took all this footage here, all the raw, clips and everything, brought it in, replaced it with this one linked clip, which is great. And we're going to bring that back in eventually. But what I like to do is actually Command or Control Z and undo that. And what that does is it puts all my original assets back just how I had them. And then I'm actually going to undo these cuts I made because that was only for bringing it in. So I'm just going to
you would prefer it not to remove it, just leave it, add it as a new
exactly
clip.
And then what I'll do at the end is I'll actually just import that sequence and it'll still be linked up and everything, and I can turn all this off, but then I still have all the original stuff right here if I need it. Yeah,
it makes complete sense.
So now back over here. I already have this made, so I'm gonna delete this and we'll work off the comp that I have. So here's our title card graphic that we're gonna make. Actually here, I'm gonna undo that for a second just to show you. Too late. There it goes. So the reason I brought in that audio, if we want, we can twirl down, and After Effects isn't great. I wouldn't suggest it for like actually editing in. But if you twirl things down, whoops, let's do the clip that we're actually on here. We can use that audio as our reference within After Effects as to where things need to happen. And if you hit the 0 key or the preview up here, it should, let's see. Bring all this down. So it's rendering. If we hit the 0 key on the number pad, it'll play back with audio. So it kept our clips exactly where they're needed. And also, if you notice here, I have markers here. So this clip here has markers on where, I'll just turn them both on here. Has markers, I put markers on there for where I kind of wanted it to come in on the music, where I want that animation to finish, and then for the out, same thing. You could also just make it however you want for the timing, and then do what I did here, and you can kind of cut the clip and just slide it over if it's not moving and nothing's happening. So let's go back into After Effects. And then what we're going to do, let's just make this really quick. Let's show how to do that. So I'm going to use this as a reference layer because that's not the actual text we want. They didn't give me the proper one in time. So we just kind of recreated it here. So all we're going to do, I'm actually going to just right click on this. This is our logo here. I'm going to go to guide layer. And what that does, it leaves it there, but then when we hit render, it's not actually going to render it out. It won't show up. So it's what's called a guide layer. It's only there for reference purposes, basically. So that way, if we ever forget to turn it off, it's not going to render anyways. Come in here, layer, new shape. And then we're selected on the rectangle tool here, and we're just going to draw something that looks, let's see, we can even get perfect with it if we want. So I hit Control R, it'll bring up these rulers, and then you can draw some guides on here if we want.
Do you find yourself needing to make a lot of graphics, or are a lot of them provided, or is it just a project-to-project situation?
I would say 9 times out of 10, I'm making them or coming up with what that looks like. Yeah, most of the time I'm making them, or it's kind of like my job to pitch ideas and like kind of come up with that. If it's something really really kind of design intensive, then maybe that's where we hand it off. But I do a lot of like 2D motion graphic work as well, so just kind of depends. But yeah, if it's a bigger campaign, then there's probably something already made. You might have to go through and do what we're doing and recreate it in that same style. So this is our reference here, and then this is my anchor point. So if I scale it, it's going to move right from that spot. That's what an anchor point is. Also, any animation I do, so I like to just have the anchor point centered in the layer, and you can do that by going right click, transform, center anchor point and layer content. So you can click that. Also Control Alt Home, which is what I use a lot. It's a common keyboard shortcut I use. It'll just put it right in the middle there. And then if we come over here, we can turn on our title and action safe. So we can see, if we draw a ruler right here's in the middle. So we basically have the right shape and everything, but what we need to do, how do we kind of slant it and get those rounded corners? So you twirl down these little carrot icons. I think that's what they're called. I don't know the scientific term, but let's see. If we come down, you have all these options for your shape layer. And I almost prefer to call this a shape bucket because you can actually have multiple shapes within a layer, which a lot of people don't know. And it'll make another thing. So that way it's all controllable on one layer and you can keep things organized a little bit more.
Yeah, there's a lot you can do with shape layers.
So, okay. So we just drew this shape layer under rectangle path. That's what we made. Roundness. Let's try to see if we can match that a little bit. So we're getting some rounded corners. If you hold shift, it'll go, you know, a lot more, and you could round it to make it like kind of pill shaped if you want. Let's go ahead and just put that at like 10 for now. Well, we'll come back to it in a second. The other part, we want to get this slant going here. So we can kind of see there. Let's see, come into, what is it, skew? Yep. So we're just going to kind of keep putting this up so it looks pretty similar. And again, this bottom one was the graphic they provided. We're just trying to save them some time and kind of recreate that. So now we have, you know, about a similar, let's see, might have to kind of rearrange it, and we can eyeball it. I don't think it needs to be, you know, terribly perfect. We could slide that over a little bit. So we're pretty close there. Nobody's going to know the difference between, you know, a couple pixels in that case. And then the roundness, now we kind of, now that we have it slanted, we can kind of see that a bit better. So you can tweak it and, you know, spend as much time as you want trying to get it close. Maybe you come back, give it a little bit more slant, a little less rounding. So that's cool. We have our basic shape done. I'm going to Control Alt Home. That's going to put my anchor point in the middle again, because we kind of moved things around. And then once you do that, if you hit Control Home, that's going to do transform. That's going to center in view. So what that does, it puts it right dead in the middle here. And then what I can do, I know it's perfectly centered in our frame. I can just drag it up and put it right where we want it. And maybe we want it, let's see here, if we were to, let's see, this is halfway through. Maybe we want it somewhere kind of, you know, to line up in the middle. Get that rule of thirds going there. So the only other thing we need here is the text, which that see-through text is kind of cool. And it's pretty simple to do. So we're going to go ahead and layer new text. Oops. I'm going to trim this layer. I think it's, what is it, Control Shift D. It basically duplicates it with duplicates the clip, puts a cut in it, and then I just delete this other one. So now we have our text layer here, and let's go ahead and just double click, and we'll, what did we decide to go with? The slab, I think. Slab Heaven, BC. Oops.
While you do that, I just want to remind everybody, we are with Alex Hogue, and he's showing us all the tips and tricks for his process and his workflow. Right now we're working in After Effects and making some graphics.
We're going to center this. Oops. Bring this up here, and then we can draw another ruler to see right where the middle is. This is the middle of our shape layer. I'll go back to our text. We can kind of see, okay, maybe it needs to go down just a little bit. And then we have the anchor point dead in the middle by doing that Control Alt Home button. Or if you right click, yeah, that transform center anchor point layer content. So now it's perfectly centered, and I can just go to scale. You can either scale it up, or we can go to the character panel here. Let's close some of these. And we can just
clarify that home key is the home key on your keyboard, correct?
Yes.
There was a question in chat. Just
I don't know if all laptops have it, but
right,
like a traditional. Like, where is that button?
Different standards of keyboards across the world. Yeah.
Yeah. So there we go. We're getting it nice and centered here. So here's our text, and let's see, why is this all caps? So I do have all caps turned on. That was an accident. Oh, there we go. Now it's really messed up. Let's retype that. All right, so all we got to do now is basically take this text, and then we're going to, let's see here. I always get these organizations mixed up. I think it's alpha invert. I might have them wrong. There we go. If anyone's got a tip to remember this, I always just end up playing with it most of the time. See, we want to have, I believe it's alpha inverted. There we go. So you want your shape layer on the bottom. You can kind of think of it, if you look at these icons, someone told me once to think about it as like construction paper, and one layer you're kind of layering on top and then you're cutting a hole in it. It's basically what we're doing here. So we're telling the text to be that hole, and then this is your layer. So the text layer gets turned off, but it's basically becoming a matte layer for this shape here. So the other thing, at this point, we could pre-compose this. So to do that, let's go ahead and delete our reference one. I think we're pretty done with that. So we have our title here. Now, the last piece we needed was to kind of have it slide in and out. And I'm going to bring this back just for my markers really quick. If you use markers as much as I do, to do markers in Premiere, it's the asterisk key.
Any reason you wouldn't just hide the layer instead of delete it?
You could do that as well. I know I don't need this anymore. And I do have, I'll show you on the athlete one, I do have some hidden layers on there. I tend to only hide layers. This is just me, but I tend to only do it when I'm like totally done with it, because sometimes you just like forget about it and you're like, where is this thing? You're like, oh yeah, there's this layer that's, you know, hidden that I still needed. And that's right, I forgot to unshy it. So all we're going to do here, pretty simple. We'll pre-compose this really quick. I use the hotkey here. Let's see, Command Shift. It's Control Shift C, and then I think it's under like composition pre-compose, and we'll just call this text. So now we have this layer here. The text and the shape are kind of built in together so we can animate it. And all it is if you hit the P key, position, we want it to stop here. So let's go ahead and let's write with our marker. That's where we want the animation to finish. At the beginning, we want it, which new version of Premiere, or I'm sorry, After Effects, by the way, this highlighting is pretty cool. I like that a lot. That's new to the newer versions of After Effects, as far as I know. So the start key, this is our start key where we want to start. This is where we're going to have it finish. And we're just going to animate it off to this side. And then it's going to come in, it's going to stop there. And then we go to our other marker here, this stopwatch. We're going to hit add another keyframe. And this is going to be it exiting off screen. Bring it back over. So that's the basic idea, but it looks a little rough to me. So what I would do, these are static linear keyframes. You can see here, it's just it's at one point and then it's at another point. The simplest, easy way to make this look a little bit better, I'm not super concerned about it here since it's off the screen. So the way it eases into it, I'm not worried about, but the way we kind of come to this stop right here is very abrupt. So if you right click on this keyframe here, go to keyframe assistant. So there's easy ease, which eases both sides. And this is when I first started in After Effects, it took my brain a little while to comprehend this. Ease in, that's easing into the keyframe that you're currently on. Ease out is to ease it out of that keyframe. So we want to ease into this one. And then if we look at what that does, it gives it this nice arc here. Yeah.
You open the graph editor and you can see it kind of explains it for you.
Yeah, it gives you a little visualization of what's happening. So if we look at it now, it's only a few frames long. So it's hard to tell, but if I were to drag this out just to give an example,
nice,
it kind of slows into it. So that's just a little thing to make it look a little nicer. It's really rare for stuff like this that it's like really hard linear keyframes. So a lot of stuff is just easing. And then we would do the same thing here, except we're going to do ease out of this keyframe because we're going from here out of it.
I think that was one of the One of the hotkeys I memorized first. Control Shift
it's
F9. Control
F9.
F9.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If your computer has that F9, mine
Right.
has that function button, so it'll start playing music if I hit F9. So I got to add the function button on there. All right, so sweet. That's pretty good. If you want to take it one step further, just something from animation I've been doing for a long time. I'll come in here, I'll highlight these two, and then I'll take this one, and I actually this is our keyframe right here. And I'll just grab this and I'll even drag it like as far over as you can go. And same thing with this one. And it just makes it a little bit, you can customize it. So then we're going real slow out of it and then really fast. And again, this is so short, it's not super noticeable, but it does kind of add like a little bit. I don't know. It just feels good. That's what I'm going for.
That's right. Just animate until it feels good. That's what I always say.
That's what you always say.
That's what I always say.
There it is. And then, I think, so this title card here, all it is, I mean, it's literally in just Premiere. We just did a cross dissolve since it was already made. And then I just kind of matched it to that same area. So if we did need to make this though, it's really simple. It's just their Skydio in the Gilroy font. We would just match the text up to the sizing, and then we would do this shape layer the exact same way that we did this one. So we would just kind of, we could even duplicate that shape layer, turn it blue, and then just put a 2+ over it. So same exact process. Let's go ahead and let's see if we're going to bring this back. Let's just go ahead and show what this would look like. So I already have this. If I save here, remember we are in that linked comp. Now, let's just turn these off. Remember I hit that Control Z to undo it. So we have, all of our original footage here, but now we don't have that comp here. We can just come over here and we can double click and import it. And we just go to where that After Effects project is located, hit open, and it should load up this little screen here. And this is our After Effects bins. Toggle this down, and you would just select your comp here and bring it in. And I think, let's see, it's this one here because we didn't rename it. Yeah.
So you just click the comp and bring in that individually.
Exactly. And then I just drag it here. I like to do it without the audio also. So I just delete that because we want the original audio. And then we just line this up right where we had everything else.
Nice.
Turn off everything below. And now we have this here. And then maybe we'd get rid of that and just use this if we wanted to. So that's kind of how we do that. That's how I'd go about it. And that's the basics of like dynamic linking. Now, if I were to come in here and change
there's a quick question about how did you add the motion blur?
I think good call out. We forgot to do that.
Yep.
So on this one, it's really, really complicated. All you got to do is come in here.
I don't think it is.
This button here, you click it.
Got it.
And then just make sure if this isn't toggled on, you won't get that motion blur.
Yep.
So just make sure motion blur is enabled here. And then the way this works, it doesn't work on those time remapping clips because we're not actually moving the position of the content. That's how After Effects interprets it. But in this case, we're moving that actual layer so it knows, hey, it needs motion blur.
And that's also where your ease in, ease out will really start to shine.
Ah, yes. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Let's see. So there's our motion blur. Let's go into our athlete call out here. And this, I'll show kind of big picture here. Here's our shide layers for whoever in the chat was mentioning that earlier. So I think I showed you guys at the beginning, we had kind of those, let's see if this will play back. It's going to be a little more intensive. So what I originally had done was this. We'll leave those ones. So originally what we did is we had this kind of 3D text going on that was masked with a foreground. but unfortunately that wasn't the same style. They wanted it, you know, tracked to the body as they're walking. So this footage here is tracked to the rocks, not to them, so that it's like the text stays there and they move past it.
Let me ask you this. Did you have to mask it out by hand, or did you use some trickery? Or
so this is where every case is different, but you can spend your life keying in After Effects and other programs. But what actually worked well here, this is really simple. So I'll just go over this really quick, but let's talk about the masking. So Kenny in the foreground here, I guess we can leave that on. Let's turn off this. Pixel motion blur is what's going to make it really slow right now. And maybe we'll drop this down to like a third. So we got Kenny here. What I did was for this, I just used Roto Brush in After Effects, and they have updated it, so it's working pretty well. And we can see here, this is just this tool. Where is it? Roto Brush here. And you can just go in and kind of grab Kenny and see how it does. For something like this, it's amazing. It worked really well. Let's see here. So we can see here, basically, it's going through and automatically selecting him. So I didn't have to worry about that. And I only need it for a few frames because remember that text goes off screen. So I used Roto Brush for that. I think I did, let's see here. By the way, the Uber key, the U key in After Effects is all the time. If you just hit U, it'll show you the properties that are altered. And if you double tap it, it'll open up everything. So for the rock foreground, I think I did it manually. Just a little garbage mat. So let's pop open that one. So
I just pick the amount of frames you want to hide, or however far you're tucking that image into.
Exactly. So like this didn't take terribly long.
Yeah.
And I think my big tip, if you're having to do it like this, where you're comping out this rock right here, less keyframes is usually more. So I wouldn't go frame by frame, at least not initially, unless you absolutely have to, because then you see all those little shakes and everything. And all we really needed to get was this section here. So I would just kind of look for those big movements, and maybe you start off and you go like 3 frames at a time, 1, 2, 3, page up, page down, and you just do a couple at a time, and then you go back and refine it.
Yeah, that's usually the way I work with. If I have to just do like a quick mat, I go from the beginning to the end and set the bulk of it, and then work my way back through.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you have a bunch of keyframes and then you need to make changes, you're going to have to go back and change 100 keyframes versus maybe you only have a handful of them like here. And then for Darren, I did the same thing. It's just that Roto Brush tool. You select him and you kind of refine it and see how it goes. So for this shot, when I did it this way, since I wanted to track it to the rocks, I used the camera tracker in After Effects. If you just hit, let's see, if we come here, I already have it on here, but if you hit track camera, it's going to bring up this effect here. And let me make this a bit bigger so you guys can see them. All these little X's, basically what it does is it goes through and analyzes the scene. And once I have this, what I'm looking for is I'm looking for those X's that kind of stay in the right general area. So on here, I could have used pretty much any one of these because it actually does pretty well. It works off of contrast. So if you have a lot of high contrast stuff that's not moving, that's great. Now, where it's not great for is you wouldn't want to use this. Anything that's on Kenny, like his backpack here, it's also moving in the shot. So that, and it may not stay on. So we didn't get a lot of tracks on him actually, but those might be kind of shaky when you link something to there and play it back. So you really want to find something that's not moving. And then from there, I would just, let's see here.
Got a couple of questions in chat. Jennifer's asking, what if you have a subject like an animal, like a cat?
Yeah.
I mean,
so this is where, okay, so this was, I'll just wrap this part up really quick because this isn't what actually ended up going forward, but that's big picture how you do it. You use the camera tracker, select those points, and then if you just right click, make text in a camera, you can do that. The ask was to actually track the text to their body though, which unfortunately, with that would typically be you would want to use like track motion instead, which will give you these little icons here, and you could, try to find a good spot on them. Maybe I think I tried like a couple different spots. Like I tried putting the point on his backpack, that little black patch there.
Yeah.
The problem with that is he is moving around quite a bit, and it just was not getting a good track, or it would lose it because maybe his backpack there goes out of frame. So I ended up just doing it same way we did this mask. I just did it manually because it was a short shot and it's not on for super long. So I didn't want to put a ton of time into it. Just because I wasn't getting a super good track with this because he is moving around. There's nothing really super ideal to track. He's kind of small in the frame. A lot of other scenarios that might work, but it wasn't working here. So the actual stuff that we use, let's go and turn these back on.
Rob is saying that he's working and lurking, but we're killing his productivity because we're, I guess, distracting him. Is that what's happening, Rob?
Uh-oh, don't let the boss see you.
Yeah. Alex's content is too powerful.
Wow, you guys are too nice. Holy cow.
Also, hello, Claudia. How's it going? It's good to see you.
All right. So what we ended up doing, like I said, that track wasn't going to work. If we track to the camera, that's looking at the whole scene, and we could lock it onto, maybe this point on this rock because it's not moving. But the ask more so is to have it kind of moving with them. And literally all I did was, this is pretty simple. You just come in here and I just keyframed them all. I did link it to a null object, which a null is, gosh, what's the best way to describe a null? A null is kind of like an invisible layer.
Yeah. It's an empty layer that you can use to do all sorts of things with.
Exactly. Yeah. It's an invisible layer. Basically, you can change the transform, position, scale properties from that layer instead of doing it from your text layer. And the reason that might be good is because, say we needed to come in here and change this text later, that would also change the transform properties of it. So it would move around. I'm trying to think what the best way to show that might be really simply, but yeah, I can't think of like an easy, good way to show that right away. But I did link it to a null layer, and all that is pick whipping up to a null object. And then I did my position keyframes from here. So I think maybe if we just to show that, let's see, if we unlink this and then maybe, I don't know if this is going to work. Maybe copy that. Okay, so let's turn off this layer. So you can do it with keyframing the actual position on that text layer. So right now this is unlinked. This is just for an example purpose. You can do it here, and that's working pretty well. But if we come in and change some of this, see, then what happens is we get the text going over him, and to compensate for that, we'd probably have to move the position. But remember, our position's keyframe to stay in that same spot. So that's why I did it to a null object. There is one other workaround. You could cheat it and use the anchor point and slide it over. I've done that a lot for motion graphics, but in this instance, I think it's better practice just to use a null object.
Yeah, I would agree. Sometimes you need that anchor point for other things.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So here we have it tracked, and what this allows me to do now, if I, need to add that in there, I can still come back to this position and slide it over, and it should still be, in line. And that way I'm controlling the position. Here, I still have access to that. So we link it to a null object, and then all I did was I just went in here, and if you turn on rulers, which is Control R, it's kind of like Photoshop. You can drag in these guides if you want. Sometimes that's helpful if you're trying to line something up, but basically I just zoomed in and quickly eyeballed it. So I set my anchor point to be right at the end here on this side. And I just wanted to try to match pretty close to his backpack the whole way. And I just keyframe the position. So I'd go, you know, here I would set my position, go a few frames forward, set another one, and then I just kind of went in between and added it where it felt necessary. But really simple, really quick. It's not perfect, but it's good enough for what we needed. And then the only other thing we did here was to add this drop shadow, just to make it a little bit easier to read. And that's as simple as coming over to effects and just typing in drop shadow. So that's what we ended up going with. Let's talk about that motion blur that we added. So this kind of pixel motion blur effect, which is kind of just a creative choice. So we had our clip speed ramped, did the same thing. You can actually, you know, you can right click, make a comp for it. You can also just Control C, copy, and then you can actually bring it in here and just paste this clip as well, Control V, which that's been around in After Effects for a while and I use it all the time. I think that's the game changer. Like it's so helpful. And we have this clip here. That way, the old school way was you'd have to, you know, set your in and out point, export it, and then bring it in. So this is something I use all the time, that dynamic link. So all I did here was there's this effect that we have on here. It's called CC Force Motion Blur. So the way this is different is because, let's go ahead and turn it off for a second. We do have this, it's a pretty intensive plugin, so it will eat resources, but let's turn that off for a second. If we were to just have motion blur on here, that's not going to work because we're not actually, it's not doing anything because we're not moving the position of this clip. So if we were to move it from here all the way to here, then motion, and we keyframed it with this position, then motion blur would work. But because the actual clip itself isn't moving, we have to use this effect, and it's called CC Force Motion Blur. Let's just go ahead and undo that. So when we copied it over, it carried over our time remapping, which is pretty cool. And all I'm going to do, we look up here, all I'm doing is controlling the shutter angle. So this acts like an actual traditional camera. So 0, there's going to be 0 motion blur. And then I think I keyframe that up to, in this case, 300, because I wanted quite a bit of motion blur. So you can see here, what I'm doing is I'm trying to line that up with where we start really time remapping this whole section. So it feels like, you know, this isn't blurry, because if I had it turned on here, let's just put a keyframe here as an example, like maybe we're at 180, or even if we had the 300 here. Very subtle on here, but you can see you're getting this weird distortion going on because what the program's doing is it's merging the frames before and after it, creating this fake motion blur. So you got to keyframe the shutter, but we can start it at 0. As the time remap gets faster, we just put a keyframe here with the stopwatch. I just put it at 300. And we let that go the whole way, all through this shot here, all the way out. And then with the time remap, it comes back around and we go back to real time. I just keyframe it back to 0. So we go 0, 300, 300, 0.
Did you start it slightly after the remap because there's a little bit of ramp on the remap?
Exactly. Yeah,
okay.
Nailed it. Yeah. So if we look at it, remapping is a little bit trickier in After Effects. I prefer to try to just do it in Premiere because it's much easier. But you can see the remap here. It kind of ramps into it. So I didn't want it to start right away. So this is that ramp here. It's ramping up to full speed. And then we come back rather quick once it does its little rotation here. So what that looks like. This clip, I didn't do it through dynamic link. You could have, but I knew this was all we were going to do with this. So I actually did what's called rendering or baking this out. And I actually just rendered this as a MOV file and brought it back into Premiere, which is what we're seeing here.
and get to where we want to go.
And then we did the same exact thing a little bit later on the shot over here.
Real quick, can you explain what time remapping is?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Time remapping is super fun.
We did it on yesterday's stream. You showed us how to do it. So if you want to check that out,
yeah.
It is on yesterday's stream.
It is on there. I'll just recap on it really quick. A lot of people, if they're new to After Effects, they might just have a clip here and they're like, I want to speed up this section. So you cut your clip, you come in here, you go to speed. I want to turn that up to 300. And then you slide over the next clip so that you get the rest of it at 0. So this would look like, just get that little speed change difference in there. Well, that's kind of the old school way of doing it. And there's no easing into it really. And then if you need to go back and change it, it's kind of hard. So time remapping is this feature here. If we right click on this FX icon, go to time remapping, you can change the speed of it with the pen tool. And let's say, it's a short clip, but you can drag these out and kind of ease into stuff. We want it to come all the way up to like 200. And you can really sync it out with music too, using this method. And then maybe we want it to, that's another point. I just hit the pen tool and put another point on there. And then we want to do that. And then we want to bring it back down to.
Are you
100.
holding Control or Alt or what to split that point?
Not holding any keys. All I'm doing is pushing the P key, which is the shortcut for the pen tool. So then I just make my point with the pen tool. And then if I switch back to this or V on the keyboard, then you can just control this as if it was audio or opacity or anything like that.
Oh, I was talking about when you, there you
drag
go.
these back and forth.
So
this is just click on the edge and drag it.
Gotcha.
If you click them, you can I never do this because it's pretty hard to notice, but you can kind of ease it if you want. Super helpful. Use it all the time. Did it in a ton of videos for GoPro. I still do it all the time. And it can just add that little subtle difference to a lot of stuff. Like we did that on the title over here. Just to kind of sync it up with those music beats. Where is it? So we have it kind of going here as well. So what I did was made that original title. And then when I brought it back in, I kind of remapped it to the music. It starts actually at 50% in slow motion, ramps up, and then goes back to 50% when we're on Darren. All right. So that's kind of what I did for graphics. Unless there's any other pressing questions, I think we can jump into some of the other polishing.
Yeah, let's do it. I do want to take a minute to just say, hey, everybody, if you're just coming in, I'm with Alex Hogue today, and this is day 2 of working through Alex's workflow, giving us all the tips and tricks. What are we up to now, Alex? What's happening?
So now I think, considering the amount of time we got for today, I do want to touch on some of the other polishing stuff like color, sound. We're going to keep it pretty vague, big picture, and then you can go and search some more if you want to get really into details. But for now, I kind of just want to let you know what's there and give you that kind of like inspiration to be like, okay, cool. Let's check that out.
Let's do it.
Cool. So the next thing we can chat on real quick is audio. We touched a little bit, but basically if I got my notes back, we get structure lock, we have all of our shots in. I think that's a good opportunity to maybe add some sound effects, maybe some natural sounds, that sort of stuff. On this production, we did actually record separate instances of audio for things. And then there was, another red camera there getting some of the shots. It was very rare that we would run the drones and the red at the same time, simply for audio purposes. In most instances, like we would always have a clean shot without the drone audio where it was possible, where they're able to maybe do 2 takes instead of 1. So what I did there, since none of the drone audio is usable, even though Skydio does have a really cool feature where you can link it to your phone audio. So if your phone's in your pocket, it can utilize that audio instead of the drone audio, which is pretty cool.
Wow. Yeah,
so you
awesome.
can have your audio for that. But again, it's from your phone, so it's not something you're going to use for like an actual movie maybe. And then if it's in your pocket while you're riding bikes, it's going to be a little scratchy. So what I did, first things first, organization. We touched on that a lot yesterday, workflow. This timeline here, I'm going to make things a little smaller. So let's get rid of that. So all this stuff here, I've organized this already and color coded it. So basically everything here is going to be dialogue or sync sound. And you could even separate it into another category, or I'm sorry, split category. So maybe you have one category only for sync sound. With this, we don't really have any true sync sound because it's all from the drone for the most part, but there are a couple clips that go with the red cameras. And then next on here, maybe we have a couple layers for like added in sound or, sound effects. So those could be whooshes, hits, or just the natural sound we used earlier for like the bike tire hitting the ground.
Is that things you would pull? Is that something you would pull after you've kind of got a rough edit together and you're like, I want to punch this, or I want to do this, make this a little more prominent? How does that work?
Yeah, I think if you have a vision, you can do it early on. You can do some of it. I wouldn't spend a ton of time doing it because as we saw earlier today, when we get notes back, we might have a whole section that needs to get changed or may not even live there by the time we get notes back. But you do want it to be clean enough that your client is going to get the idea. So yeah, I can't remember what I did. I think it adds a lot to have some of these sound effects in here. Let's just go ahead and turn some of them on or play it with and then, or play it without and play it with. So like here, out here with some Skydio drones, shooting some mountain biking. So that works, there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to, take it to the next level, maybe we go find some drone sounds and you can look around on YouTube or stock libraries, or maybe you have some from other footage. In this instance, I think I had, other clips with drone audio, and I would just kind of go in there and find something that sounds about right. Let's go ahead and make this a little bigger. So we heard it without the audio there, but maybe if you add in some drone sounds, it's just going to add that other element like you're there. Out here with some Skydio drones, shooting some mountain biking. So just adding in lots of natural sounds. Basically, I would go through the entire piece and just see and think about like, hey, where's maybe something that I could add in a cool little sound effect. And in this case, it's mostly natural audio. So here, let's go ahead and just mute the music for a minute. There's no audio underneath naturally since it was all from the drone. So this might be a cool one. Maybe not so much when they're further away because we wouldn't really hear it, but when it's closer up like this, maybe that's a good opportunity to actually hear some raw sounds and make it feel a little more gritty, so to speak. So I basically went through some of the red footage and looked for little audio clips that I could use. Cause again, we didn't usually have the drone and the, other camera up at the same time. So you got to kind of get creative and recreate it. So I just went through, I tried to use clips that we already had, and I would look for maybe a shot that would have a similar tire landing, and you're kind of faking it all. But when you blend it all together, nobody's going to know. It's the art of what's called Foley.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a little Foley magic.
So let's hear, we heard what that sounds like, literally nothing. Let's hear with some sound design on it. So you can tell like one of those tracks is probably looped a little bit. It doesn't sound perfect. Don't worry about that because you're only going to be hearing a little bit of it by the time you put the music back in.
So unique.
So I think it just helps quite a bit actually. The other thing, if you guys in the chat like can't hear that at all, good headphones. It's another really important thing with audio. The speakers you listen to this stuff and the speakers that you monitor on make a huge difference. So what this sounds like in my headphones, maybe my computer speakers, I wouldn't even hear some of that. Or maybe on my laptop, it just sounds like way too loud. So, you want to try to be consistent and mix with good headphones, and then go back and, you know, if possible, listen to what it sounds like on a laptop speaker or your cell phone, or, you know, all sorts of different sources, because that'll make a big difference. So I would go through the whole piece, add in some of that audio. Once you've done that, we kind of, some other ones like this section here, I added in tires on the ground. So this was an instance where he only did this once, and honestly, video doesn't do it justice, because that slope that he's on, you kind of tell here, but it's really steep. He did it, I think he might have done it twice, but like from that angle, from that height, he only did it once. So I did just take some of that like raw tire rolling audio, throw it in there, and with the music in there, you don't hear the drone too much. And even still, I'm not super concerned if you do hear the drone, since it is a drone video.
Oh, there's a question from Andy. What speakers or headphones do you prefer?
I like these ones. These are Audio Technicas. I don't know the exact model. There's also like, they're pretty common. They're just a nice clean audio, and it's kind of turned me into a little bit of an audiophile now when I listen to different things. It just sounds, it's intended to hear kind of everything. They're good for mixing. There's headphones you can spend hundreds of dollars on and really go kind of all over the place. I think I got these on sale for like $120 maybe, but they're super comfortable, wear them all the time, and I've been using them for years. This is probably my third pair of them. So yeah, I'd look into the Audio Technicas, and I know Sony has another pretty popular mixing monitor pair, is what they're called, like a monitor headphone. So going into audio a bit more, the other thing we're going to want to do after we add in those sound effects is we kind of want to level everything. So the biggest mistake, biggest no-no with music and audio in general is to have peaking, which is where your sound's just getting blown out. So if I were to turn off, this is all, let's come back here actually. I think this is already turned down. Yeah, it's at 5. Let's just put it to 0 for a second. All this is kind of working together, but out here, see these red bars here, means it's just way too hot. It's going to get distorted and blown out, and we really want to avoid that at all costs. So let's go ahead and put this back to -5. So the first thing I would do, since, you know, I think when we come in, and this will probably even be with what we did yesterday, is just set a good audio level. I just put everything to -5 on the music. That way it wasn't blowing out. Typically music comes in fairly loud, and we don't always want it that high. We probably want it, it depends on the video you're doing, but I would say like around this kind of -12 mark is a good thing. This video is primarily music, so I was okay with it going a little bit louder. But I would say music, you want to try to mix it to -12 to, I went for like kind of a -6 here, just because music was so driving for this piece. Our audio here, and by audio, I mean our voiceover.
Shooting some mountain biking.
I was aiming for
Some Skydio drones.
typically around -6 is where you want it. I was going for like -6 to -3. But again, we're just
Shooting
looking
some
to make
mountain
sure
biking.
nothing's peaking.
You get a zone like this that's just endless slabs.
It's like rugged West Coast coastline. So unique.
And then obviously you can tell here, like all my audio here is like cut to fit in there. So, you know, if you have a whole line, consider just chopping it up and trying to make it fit.
Rugged West Coast coastline. So unique.
I will say Premiere, sometimes this audio bar isn't 100% trustworthy.
It's endless slabs.
Sometimes I'll go through and
Rugged West
you'll
Coast
get a little peak
coastline.
there, and then another time I'll go through and that peak won't be there. I think it's kind of like a render thing, but just be aware of it. Happens sometimes. Usually if you kind of do it again once or twice, it'll play properly. Okay, so we want to set those levels, and you can go in and you can adjust it on here. Just with your arrow tool, you can adjust the levels here. I go in, you can get nitpicky, use the pen tool and kind of set your points here if it sounds loud at first. And again, this is where having good headphones is really going to come into play, because you're going to hear things that I wouldn't hear on my speakers.
Definitely not gonna get fat on this trip. I know.
Not only
So
are
let's
drones
focus on this section here, and I'll also show you guys some other cool audio stuff.
launched the Skydio drone.
So I took out the music here and I just copied this over. This is the audio as it was originally.
Drone to scope for
You can tell
access
it's
to
still
this
pretty
line
low.
that I scouted from Google Earth, and it looks like we can hike up the ridge and get to where we want to go.
Definitely not gonna get fat on this trip. I know.
This is really low, almost impossible to hear. And he says, for those that can't hear, he says, we're definitely not going to get fat on this trip. And they're not mic'd here. This was just a random shot of them going by, but it's a funny moment. So we wanted to try to like see what we could do to push the audio and get it in there. And then ultimately we also went with, you know, some subtitles on there. So then that audio is super low. We got to bring that up.
Get fat on this trip. I know.
Not only are drones
And we're
rad
back
for
to the other
filming, but they're
shot.
also rad for scouting.
So
Oh, it looks a little rugged, eh?
So that's our audio here. And then what we can do is kind of clean this up so it sounds a little bit better. And you'll notice this section here where the audio is just, he's really far away from the mic. It's still going to be a little rough, but it'll be a little bit better. We'll be able to hear it.
Launched the Skydio drone.
Now our levels
to
are much
scope for
higher.
access to this line that I scouted from Google Earth. And it looks like we can hike up the ridge and get to where we want to go.
Definitely not gonna get fat on this trip. I know.
Not only are drones rad.
So compared to this.
Definitely not gonna get fat on this trip.
So what's going on here is a couple different things. If I click on this and go to effects controls, we got graphic equalizer, denoiser, all sorts of little filters going on, which is a little overwhelming if you're just starting out in audio. What Premiere now has is, if we go into workspaces, let's go to audio. So what you can do, and let's actually go, well, before we get into that. So these here, you could select, I like to do it, basically, this is kind of a cheat or shortcut way to like applying all those filters individually. And that's basically what Premiere is doing with their new built-in essential sound tools. So if you come in here and you click on these when it's not saving, if you click on these, let's see. So we know these clips are from like a different section. So that may not work as well if we process them all at the same time. But you can come in here. And basically, if you, we'll clear that for a second. So if there's nothing on here, you come in here. Here's your audio clip. Let's grab all of these and we're going to say, hey, this is dialogue. We're going to tell Premiere we got dialogue here. And so far it hasn't done anything other than basically put it in a dialogue bucket. But what you can do is you can auto match this. So if these were maybe somewhat separate clips, I don't think it's going to work super well on here because it's so far away, but we can actually give it a try. Let's go ahead and just hit all that as dialogue. Auto match. I think I might have this applied on here. You could basically go through, select all your audio. Auto match, it auto matches it to a particular volume.
Skydio drone to scope for access from Google Earth. And
So in my experience, sometimes this works really well. Other times it doesn't work really well, especially for the type of work I do, because a lot of times the audio, it's basically looking for those peaks and kind of setting things in there, but that doesn't always work perfectly, but it's a good starting point. If you need it louder, you can click here and, you know, turn it up even louder, but it's basically trying to match the overall volume of all these clips here together. Now, what else you can do when it's in that dialogue? You have clarity. You can play around with some of these if you want to like boost maybe the EQ. It's a male voice. You can control how much you want. I would caution, you know, go light on these because if you get too much, you know, you're going to get some weird distortion happening.
Let's hear it.
I launched the Skydio drone, and it looks like we can hike up the ridge and get to where we want to go.
So here you can kind of tell where it auto match that, and it sounds a little harsh.
We can hike up the ridge and get to where
like
we
that
want to go.
and just comes in really hot. So sometimes it works well. Other times I like to just go through, set a level, and then do it manually. And I will just come in here and set those levels as I want. What I do use a lot though is, whoops. We'll get some lag here. There we go. I do use kind of this EQ boost in here. If you have a really noisy clip, this repair can be handy. And it's just basically all it's doing is applying the filters that have always been in Premiere and audio, but nobody, unless you're an audio person, nobody understands how to use them. So they basically went in and made this pretty simple. And I'd suggest, open up this essential sound, go in there, play with it, and try to get the audio to what sounds good. And you want it something clean. You also want it loud enough. Let's see, what else can we talk about there?
So I was going to mention, I don't know if you've ever, and I don't think you needed to use it for this one because the way you cut the music. But have you ever used the auto ducking features or any of that?
Just reminded me. I was actually just going to show that. That was.
I was trying to hold off, man.
That's perfect because I forgot about it. So I do want to showcase that a little bit, where it is handy if you have like something simple and it'll make real quick work of it. So let's take like.
Came in here.
Let's use this as an example. Let's go ahead and we're just going to focus on like this little section here, and we got some music and we got some dialogue. So let's go ahead and let's go ahead and take out the keyframes here because I already have it there, but let's take out the keyframes. Let's put this at like, our -5 that we had it across the board. And so right now the volume's not being lowered for his audio because if you just stack all the audio together, it's going to get too loud. You won't be able to hear the talking. You kind of need to bring the music down.
It's like somebody came in here with concrete. There's a cool little rock face on the
So we're getting some peaking. I can't really tell what he's saying. So what you could do, and you could do this across the board for your whole edit, but remember these buckets I talked about? If we know this is our dialogue, we can come in here, put that as dialogue. It's labeled as dialogue. And then we come in here. I had already labeled that one as music, but we'd come in here, label this one as music, gives you kind of a different set of options. There's these presets in here where you can automatically have it do what we were doing, where it's ducking the audio, which has nothing to do with a bird, but it is just turning down the volume where there's voiceover. So we can just try maybe smooth vocal, and you can control how much you want it here. So far it hasn't actually done anything, but you hit this generate keyframes and then watch down here. Now we have those keyframes for that ducking. And this is just makes quick work of going through and doing it all manually.
Absolutely. Saves a bunch of time.
Yeah, really cool. And then what I do like about this feature is since they are keyframes here, now I can go through and fine tune it if I need to. Let's hear what that sounds like. Wow, we went a little too low.
It's like somebody came in here.
Let's bring our audio back up on the music. Let's maybe bring this down a little bit.
It's like somebody came in here with concrete.
Not sure why.
I think you have to regenerate again.
Oh, is that what's going on? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there it is.
It's like somebody came in here with concrete. There's a cool little rock face on this spine. Terminal velocity.
And then our audio for the music's coming back up. So that's just a really, really awesome feature to have kind of built in. Makes it really quick. And then you can go in and tweak things. If we had more time, we would kind of dive in and get those levels a little bit more where we want. And we could do that across the board with all of our audio on the whole timeline, just all at once, and have these levels all set.
We got about 16, 17 minutes left.
Wow, time
So
is
anything you,
flying.
I know. But if there's anything you want to get to, if chat, you have any questions you want to ask, now is the time.
Yeah, throw them in there. I have so much I could talk about. Let's talk, let's see, real briefly on color, maybe. So if obviously we have all kinds of different footage going on here, and it's going to take some time to go through and maybe match this drone footage with the raw red footage that looks, you know, really flat. But what we would do, let's go ahead and just take this clip as an example. And we're not going to go too in the weeds here, but I want to talk about Lumetri. I don't know. How do you guys say it?
I say Lumetri, but it may be
okay.
Lumetri.
Is it a guy or where's that coming from? I'm not sure.
I think it's
anyone know?
Yeah, now we have to look it up. Val, I think Val's going to get on that.
We got people on it.
Val. That's right. Got our best people on it.
All right. So this shot here, what I did, I went over to the color panel for workspaces, brings up Lumetri, however you want to say it. The other thing I have that I want to open up, let's go ahead and close that. I want to bring up, scopes. I already have it up. So we have our scopes here. And then we're selected on this clip. The way this works, it can be kind of intimidating at first. This is just a color waveform. And basically it's giving you information because when you look at color on different monitors, if I look on this computer versus looking on my laptop, depending on how expensive stuff is, same with nice TVs, cheap TVs, black may not actually be what's black. So something might look really dark on one screen, really bright on another. This is kind of your scientific fail-safe for that. This is like what the true values are. So in conjunction with this, you want to have, you know, ideally a pretty nice color calibrated monitor, but when in doubt, trust your scopes. So over here, this is just an effect. It can be found in effects, or again, if you just go to the color panels here, it automatically pops up. You can change your white balance, exposure. And the way this is working is 100 is pure white. So anything above 100 is, it's just white. There's no more information there. 0 is pure black. Anything below that, that's all there is. So what we want to do ideally is get our whites to be white and the blacks to be black. So what I would do is come in here and maybe we can see here, if I bring this way down, we're losing some information here. Some of that's okay, but initially I kind of want to get that set to pretty close to 0, and it's already fairly close. But our whites, they're not actually white, so these clouds aren't really full white. The other thing too, if I just turn on this layer, we can see what happens here. You can see this is actually a representation of what we're seeing on screen from left to right. So we see right here, there's some blown out white, or pure white rather, and that's our white text because it's pure white. And then we get some blues and white here. So we can actually read this across the screen. And that's the same here, you know, maybe it's kind of hard to tell. This is a big landscape shot, but this would be the left half of the frame. This would be the right half of the frame. So I would bring up the whites maybe to just below, so we're not losing any data. And on my screen, maybe your screen, maybe that might look a little blown out, but again, trust your scopes as much as possible. So I would go through, tweak that. I usually leave the shadows kind of where they are, and I just initially set the whites and the blacks, maybe throw a little bit of saturation on it. The big thing that I do that really helps your color, makes it pop, come into this curves, and this is just a typical curve. It can be found in After Effects as well. Put these 3 little points on here. And this is basically down here is your blacks, up here is whites. This is your midtones. I tend to leave this one in the middle. And then I'll just bring this down ever so slightly. And you want to be really subtle with it. But what this can do is just give a nice little bit of contrast and pop. And if you watch what's happening over here, we're not actually raising this white really too much more. It might go a little bit, but we're basically stretching this section and this section of blacks. So like that's way too much, but I might bring it here, and that's essentially doing a very similar thing to contrast, but it gives you more control over how exactly you want it to look. And then maybe I'll bring this back down so nothing's getting blown out.
Looks like we have an answer from Val, who went and looked up Lumetri. I think it says Lumetri Deep Color Engine was originally developed by Iridas, Iridas, and was first released in 2011. And then I think Adobe acquired, let's see, yeah, Adobe acquired that and incorporated speed grade, and that is what it is now, I guess. It is now the Lumetri color panel in Premiere.
Interesting. Okay, I'll keep that in mind for trivia.
There was a
nights on
fandom
Tuesday.
page for this. There was an actual fandom page for this.
That's unbelievable. The time that people have things for.
Yeah, and Jennifer says, let's see if I can find it. Jennifer Poole asked, how detailed do you go with voice, especially if it's a different language? And I'm not sure exactly, Jennifer, if you could clarify what you're asking there. Unless you know, Alex, I'm not sure what that means.
I don't entirely. Yeah, a little clarification would be good. If you're talking just like how much work do I put into the voice?
Right.
I would say as much as you can to make it sound good. Yeah, I don't have too much more on that. A couple other things to touch on color here really fast. There is this auto button. That's just kind of the one-click fix. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it can be a good starting point, and I tend to find that it'll bring the blacks a little too dark, so I end up bringing them back up.
Yeah, that is usually the first thing I do, is just, what does auto do? Let's see what auto does, and then edit from there. If it works, it works. If not,
yeah. So for general color, really quick, I would say biggest things to do: come in, set your whites, set your blacks, get it to about 100. Try not to be, clipping everything too much up there, because then we're losing a lot of information in the shot. Same with the blacks, put it right at black. And then this curves is just a nice way. It kind of will play with the saturation and the contrast and just adds that nice little pop across the board. Just really subtle. You can kind of overdo it, but you can kind of play. I usually leave the middle one where it's at, but play around with it depending on how contrasty you want it to look. You can also do contrast here, but again, it's basically doing the same thing, but I prefer doing it this way because you have a little more control over the midtones and what it's actually affecting. I know we're running out of time. There's a lot more I wanted to cover. You can add masks on here. If you go into the effects, you can mask out. Maybe you want to get really advanced and mask the sky here, and then you can track it and have separate layers for each piece of color. And that's where your color really starts to shine. And I did do that on this piece. Color was, a whole day process. But, if you can mask out certain areas and fix certain areas, that's really where your shot's going to come to life.
We do have another question. Is this done for different screen calibrations?
Yeah, so that kind of goes back to what the budget is, what the purpose is. Yeah, you kind of want to exactly. So everything online, which is most of the content I make nowadays, is going to be in Rec 709, I believe. So that's here. So that's not to get super nerdy, but that's basically just a color profile that everything that's viewed on a computer screen is basically online, is viewed through that color space. But yeah, you want to try to calibrate your monitor if you have a nice one, get something that's color accurate.
Another question about audio. What devices were used for recording, and do they use a boom or a small mic?
Yeah, so like I mentioned a little bit earlier, there was a lot of more audio recorded. The stuff I pulled from wasn't that audio because I unfortunately didn't have access to it. But we did record like with a boom mic. We'd go around and spent, a couple hours or, an hour or two just getting different bike sounds that we could use. That was shot with, a nice boom mic and everything. What I was pulling from, because it's all I had to work with, I didn't have all the original footage, was just, audio from the Red camera as much as possible, or getting scrappy and pulling it from wherever I could. The only other thing, so that's kind of color really fast in a nutshell. The other thing we did with this edit was we did make an Instagram export. And if anyone's, familiar with that website of Insta, They have recently changed it. It used to be for a native post, it was 4x5. Now I believe all video is 9x16. It's basically posted as a reel on Instagram. So if you want to share that out, you would want to make a aspect ratio that's formatted to that. So if we had our full version here, 16:9, all I would do is I would probably just make a new sequence. Let's go back to my editing workflow here. We could come in here and make a new sequence that's set up to be, let's see, what is it? Custom. Now everything is sorry. Was it, again, I mixed up 1080 by 1920. So it's backwards now.
Yeah, exactly.
Square
just
pixels.
Just a heads up, we've got about
progressive.
6 minutes.
Okay. So we'll keep this short. I would just make, so we made a cut down for this. So literally just kind of ins and out points from the original piece. If you want to do that quickly, you had a bigger version for YouTube, you want to bring it over to Instagram. We have this full version here. I would just bring this in, keep existing settings because we want to keep it this aspect, and then we can scale this as needed accordingly. You could do it that way, or you could do, yeah, I guess that's the best way to do it. So we'd set this up here, and I would go through and just kind of like reframe it as I need to. You can put your cuts here and then just reframe it. So you might need to put some like keyframes and say like here, we want it to be here. And then the next shot is here. So I'll just go in and kind of splice it up. The audio, again, you would kind of need to remix it if you were not grabbing just a clean section. If you were doing a separate cut down, you'd need to do a little bit of editing, but typically I do all my work here, get it all colored, graphics done as much as possible, and then make a new version like this and then resize it would be the simplest, quickest way. But for all your Instagram stuff, video, just make sure you're doing it in the right aspect ratio. Yeah, I think that's kind of all I got there. I know that's kind of big picture overview. There's a lot to go over, and we covered a lot. So
yeah, we just had a comment from Rob saying you covered a lot, and they're gonna have to rewatch the stream when they're not trying to do a layout at the same time.
Yeah, boss is watching.
Yeah, if you'd like to try to give it an overview for the past couple of days or today's work, feel free.
Yeah, so we kind of basically took this edit from, it was an actual edit from my client Skydio, which is a drone company, and we started off yesterday going through. So if you go back and watch yesterday's capture, started off talking really big picture, what you're looking for in an edit, what you want to consider when you're talking with your client, and then getting into how to structure a story for this sort of thing. So we talked about kind of what to look for, the process and workflows I use to keep everything organized. So how you name these folders, how you keep everything organized so that if somebody else comes in and needs to edit this project, which is pretty common in the professional world, they can look at this and it's pretty intuitive. It just makes sense. So we talked about that, how to bring in all your media, how to pull selects, and selects are basically just your best footage, how to work with that, build it out, find music, kind of a broad overview of everything, to be honest, from like start to finish.
Yeah, you covered graphics and just audio tweaks and lots of tips. It's really been a really great couple of days. Andy's saying thanks a lot. Love both of these sessions. I mean, there's lots of great feedback from chat.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for coming and just sharing your workflow with us. And Adobe, if you're listening, you have to have Alex back. I know there's so much more. I think we've only just, cracked the surface here. But yeah, I think that's
lots to go over. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's going to do it for today. But I do want to say we do have the XD Creative Challenge with Jesse Showalter coming up next. And of course, Adobe Live will be back tomorrow with a full day of master classes, followed by office hours, which if you've never seen office hours with Nick Longo and Andrew Hockrattle, you need to check it out. But yeah, thanks so much, Alex.
Yeah,
really
thank you.
appreciate your time.
So happy to be here. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I see, Felix, I appreciate those comments. If you guys have other questions, feel free to reach out to me on my website, Instagram. I love to help as much as I can.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm going to drop your links back into chat real quick, just so everybody has that. Guys, go follow Alex on all of his social medias, all the socials, I guess we'll say.
All the interwebs.
I don't know. Yeah, those things. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
We'll see you soon.